This is the beginning of project 3, and before we get started calculating dependent variables and doing any of the other work that we're going to do in this last section, we need to actually do some data work and make sure that our data is really valid and reliable as we go to the next step. When you're doing statistics and when you're doing projects like this, each project builds on the previous one, and so if you have one step off, it basically throws everything that comes behind it out the window. And so it's sort of like building that kind of house of cards. If you have one thing that's flawed, everything just sort of tumbles. In this project, one of the most important things is that you have the same member of Congress throughout the different rows of your project. So your member of Congress is going to be identified by this ICPSR code. So what we need to do before we go forward is make sure that these ICPSR codes are correct all the way across, right? That it's the same one. So I'm going to show you how to do some quick checks. We've got like all of this data in here and it's really confusing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of some simple Excel tools and go through and I'm going to go through and hide some of these columns and allow me to do a quick comparison. Okay, so let's hide these things, and I'm going to hide these, and I'm going to go on. I'm going to pause here and I'll come back in just a minute. So here is the spreadsheet with all of the columns hid, and you know columns are hidden whenever you look up here and you see this little, you'll see an extra little space between the columns. That just tells you that you're missing columns in between them. You want to be careful when you're editing and moving columns around in this hidden mode, because if you have hidden cells, sometimes it won't do it correctly. So if you make corrections later and you have to kind of move, insert rows and do that kind of stuff, make sure that you get rid of all these hidden columns. But for now, you can go through and you can make sure that these numbers line up as we go across. And so I'm just going to kind of page through here and I'm going to look, and everything looks really well. I'm going to go through, I'm going to keep paging through, and I'm seeing everything looks like it's lining up pretty well for this one. As we get down to the bottom, I should find one. Okay, so this is the one that I fixed in the thing earlier, but now I've got 3905 all the way across, right? For some reason, they missed that House member's vote in that particular vote. He's a missing entry, and that's okay. Just leave him in there. But in this particular sense, I've got everything done. So once I have that done, I can just go up here to the top. I can select the rows, and then I can right-click and unhide, and I go back to the same old format. I'll give you another example here. In this one, Miles had a really good example because he had missing data, and he went through and he did a really nice job with this, and so I wanted to show you what he did. So here we don't have that, whatever number this is, and if you go all the way out here in the second set of votes, you pick up this new member of Congress, right? And so here we had 2100, and then 2101 came in and they cast this last vote. So you just have this one, and that's exactly the way to do it. This is all these other votes are going to be missing, and that's exactly right. 2105, and then we'll look out here, you're going to have 2106, right, is going to come in, and then this one will be 2110, and so those are just new members of Congress that are coming in the middle of the session for some reason, or in between sessions. If you had votes that kind of took place between the first and second session, then sometimes you pick up, you'll have somebody pass away or somebody steps down to run for another office or something along those lines. So this is what your data needs to look like. You need to have these kind of separate rows for all these different individuals, and so if they're not aligning for whatever reason, go back in and then just kind of insert these blank cells and make sure that everything lines up. Once you have that done, you will be ready to go to the next step, and that step is going to be putting some labels on these votes. So let me pause here, and then I'll come back to that in just a minute. Okay, one more thing that we need to do before we go to the kind of really start moving forward and doing a lot of data manipulation is we need to add some variables into this project. So first thing I'm going to do is we have 3 columns for each one of these. We have a roll call number, this is the vote number, this is the member of Congress number, and then this is the actual position that the member of Congress took on that vote. 1s, 6s, and 7s are usually kind of the ones that we see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the variable labels into these different columns because we're going to need those whenever we calculate the dependent variable later. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this one because I don't necessarily need that number. But what I do need is I need a variable number in on these CAS codes. But I need these CAS codes to reference the roll call number. So I'm just going to quickly do this. I'm just going to say vote 525 and go to the next one. All right. I'm going to go out here and I'm going to say vote 526, vote 527, vote 528, and so on and so on. So I'm going to pause here and then I'll come back. So I've gone through and I've added these variable labels, and so at this point I'm going to have one for the ICPSR. Make sure as you go down, if you have any of the gaps in this one, make sure that you copy over and fill those gaps, right? So if you have like a gap all the way down, I don't have any in this one to actually show you, but make sure that you have a correct number for all of these observations in that column. Then what you need to do is go through and make sure that you've got all these votes. I got a 525, 526, 527, 528, 529, 530, 31, 32, all the way out to my vote 540. And so I've got all of my kind of key variable columns kind of labeled and identified. When I import them into SPSS, I'll be able to know what they are. And I've got members of Congress numbers in this column all the way down to the bottom, and I don't have any gaps in those. So once I have that, I'm going to be ready to go to the next step. So I'm going to save this out to my desktop as, I'll save this as, let's see, save this as project 3, and then just call it micro, or I call it micro example is what I'm going to do. Okay, so that being done, we are done with kind of the initial data manipulation, and we're ready to go to coding the votes.